Come as you are, as you are. It's Nirvana, Daniel Craig. He was Bond, now he's not. And he is William Lee. Yeah.
William Lee.
Please. Yeah.
I love that.
Thank you. I worked very hard on it.
These are getting better and better.
Oh, good.
I'm Wilson Lai.
I'm Benjamin Yap.
And I'm Eli Sands.
You're listening to Deep Cut. On Deep Cut, we compare a director's most popular film with a personal favorite chosen by one of us.
We also discuss that director's life and career to bring in context that helps us view their movies as they may want us to.
If you're enjoying the show, please rate and subscribe to us wherever you listen to podcasts to help others discover the show. Better still, you can leave a review for us on Apple Podcasts or comment on episodes directly on Spotify. You can also keep up with us on Instagram and Letterboxd at Deep Cut Pod, and join our Discord to chat with us directly. We also have a Patreon if you'd like to support us. You can find links to all these via the link in the description or go to deepcutpod.com.
Welcome to our Deep Cut Upkeep episode on Luca Guadagnino's latest feature film, Queer. If you're looking for other Guadagnino films that we've discussed on the podcast, you can check out episode 74's discussion on Challengers and episode 82's discussion on I Am Love. Adapted from the William S. Burroughs novel of the same name, Queer tells a story of an American expat in Mexico City in 1950. William Lee, who becomes infatuated with a younger American expat GI, or ex-GI, Eugene Allerton. The possibility of finally having a genuine connection with someone else becomes Lee's new obsession, as is his ongoing search for greater highs. Okay, that didn't land. Never mind. He's looking to get high, guys. He's looking to get high.
Oh, yeah.
He's not trying to say hello.
Is it me you're looking for?
Hello.
Well, we actually have talked about this movie on 2 previous episodes of this podcast, the New York Film Festival episode and most recently our Year in Review episode. So you can also check out brief reactions to that there. But today we're going to be diving in deep in this movie now that all 3 of us have seen it. But we're going to start off with some general non-spoilery reactions. And I think the best way to start this off is to go by like chronological order. So like who saw this movie first?
That's me.
Yeah, it's you.
Yeah, I saw Queer back in September of 2024 at the New York Film Festival. I came away from that screening thinking there's a lot that's really interesting here, particularly Guadagnino's talent for texture and intimacy and sensuality, very much so on display here. But I was missing a kind of coherent core. Having sat with it more and also gone back through it, partially through both of your more recent viewings of the movie, I'm feeling like the core is Daniel Craig's character, William Lee, trying to capture a feeling that he has lost and maybe never existed. So that gives it a little bit more of a center to me, but I don't know that I still have a super strong connection to it. I'm more excited to hear about your guys' experience.
Great. I think it's good for us to, have a varied reaction to this because I think this is a very complex work compared to Luca's more other like down the line pictures that paint a simpler story. I'll go next because I saw this at the start of 2025 and unfortunately did not get to see this on the big screen, but I really, really loved watching Queer. I am not familiar with William S. Burroughs at all, but I think understanding Luca as a filmmaker and like knowing what he likes to make movies about, I think this is like a perfect story for him. Something about desire, something about longing, even if it's not like it's maybe unrequited desire or unrequited love. I think that feeling of wanting to be wanted or wanting to be loved is so strong in this. And I think that is not just from the two central performances from Daniel Craig and Drew Starkey, but also just the feeling that the entire world Luca brings to life here evokes. I'm particularly zeroing in on this production design cinematography combo that's happening here. And yeah, interested to talk more about that with you guys later on in the episode. Ben, you watched this most recently, and what did you feel about this film?
I'm a little torn on the film. I think I admire what Luca is doing, as always. And I think it's difficult to watch this without thinking about his other work, especially the work that he's making around this work. For example, spoiler alert, if you haven't listened to the Year in Review episode, but I really like Challengers. But if Challengers is like a firecracker of a movie, there's like a smoldering, burning cigarette left on the table, on the ashtray. And I think it's just a different kind of movie, but it is impressive how different it is in terms of goals. Because this isn't a movie that's trying to raise your heart rate the same way that Challengers is trying to do. I think narratively, the structure of it has this distinct chapter headings, right? Which Challengers does not have. Challengers, it moves at its own pace and it doesn't wait for you. Whereas this one, you kind of are sitting with the characters a lot. And a lot of it is that this film is about Daniel Craig's character of William Lee and you trying to understand him. So it's more of a character study, if anything. But as much as I think that I do get a sense of him, I think I do run up against the problem of not knowing what the story really is here. Or if there really is a story that he's trying to tell, aside from just being kind of this character, or this is William Lee / William S. Burroughs as a guy just roaming around Mexico. But I also do really admire the artistry behind a lot of the production design and the cinematography. And I do think the acting is really good across the board. Like, I remember Eli saying that he wasn't convinced by Craig, but I think I do see what Craig is doing. And I feel like I can get a sense of his character, which is a pretty complex being that is really difficult to pin down. And there's something almost outlandish about the film. And I think maybe, if anything, the film already has a few flights of fancy. I think I kind of wish there were more. I think it's sitting in this middle zone between realism and fantasy. And I kind of wonder whether it would have been better for it to really commit to more fantastical things or like more subjective shows of like what's going on in his head, which it has, just not to a high degree, not to like the whole film. It has moments of subjectivity, like dreamlike sequences. But I do find it fascinating as a film. It's not going to be a Luca film that I think about too much, I would say, but it is interesting in the grand scheme of it.
Yeah. Great. Okay. If you haven't seen this film, I think now's the time where you gotta stop the recording. As much as we miss you, I think it would be best if you go and watch the film, and then you can come back and listen to our spoiler-filled discussion of Queer. If you don't mind spoilers, feel free to listen on. Yeah.
If you want to think about whether you want to watch the film, for me, I think this film is extremely influenced by 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Right, which nobody has told you yet. So if you're hearing this for the first time, you gotta go watch this film to understand why.
Yeah.
I already told you 3 acts, 3 chapters. Kubrick's.
I will even say that being the least hot on this movie of the 3 of us, I still think it's worth watching.
Being the most hot, definitely worth watching.
And he is the most hot.
Thanks. Thank you.
Just kidding.
Okay.
Ben, you are too.
I have a little bit of context that I'm just going to pull out of my head, out of all like the YouTube videos that I've watched of Luca talking about making this movie. Luca Guadagnino was apparently obsessed with this book as a teenager. He saw it in a bookstore, was intrigued by the Italian title of this book, which I think is not literally queer, but it just means like existing on a different wavelength from other people. So I think he bought the book and became really, really obsessed with it and wanted to make it. He wrote his own screenplay of Queer in his 20s that didn't get made and didn't see the light of day. But that's just an idea for you to think about, like how much he wanted to make this film. So flash forward to maybe like 2022 or 2023 when him and the team that he's working with making last year's Challengers are shooting in Boston, and Guadagnino is still trying to get the rights to make this film. And I think he finally secures it with his production company and goes over to Justin Kuritsky's, who is the writer of Challengers. Kuritsky's had written Challengers without Luca. Like he wrote that on his own, and then the script found its way to Luca. But this time, Guadagnino comes to Kuritsky's with the book and tells him to read it, and if he would be interested in making a movie about it. And Kuritsky's reads it and really connects with the book and writes the screenplay. And then on, they assemble pretty much the same team back together. Sayumbu Muktiprom, Luca Guadagnino's longtime cinematographer collaborator, is back on, as is his editor, Marco Costa. And going into it, I think Guadagnino really wanted William Lee to be played by Daniel Craig, but didn't think it would happen because Craig has this Bond thing and big blockbuster thing that he has. But Craig was really receptive to the script and also to the possibility of working with a director like Luca, and says yes. And I think after that, he assembles the rest of his cast and they shoot the film in its entirety in the Cinecittà studios in Rome, Italy. And all of these are built sets. I think there's a lot of use of miniatures in this, and his production designer, Stefano Baisi, does a really incredible job recreating, I guess, a stylized version of Mexico City in the 1950s, and also shouting out former head of Loewe and head of J.W. Anderson, Jonathan Anderson, who also did the costume design in this film. And this is his second film after Challengers. So he's still, in film terms, he's young and up and coming, but it's not like he's like leading a $1 billion fashion company. But yeah, this is this is his second feature film. Okay, that is off the top of my head, the context of this film. I think what we can start talking about here is the narrative, and maybe we can break down the narrative structure because it is broken up into 3 chapters. Chapter 1 being titled, How Do You Like Mexico? Chapter 2, Traveling Companions, and Chapter 3, The Botanist in the Jungle. And the epilogue. That's, I guess, 3.5 chapters. Should we start by talking about the first section of this film and how we are introduced to these characters and the world of this movie?
Sure.
Okay.
How does this begin? I'm trying to remember.
So the film begins with a sort of like images of like brainwaves connecting with each other. It's just like cloudy images of like, I don't know, zaps of energy in color. And then it goes into a title sequence, which I thought was so beautiful, of just bird's eye view shots of items placed on the bed, like their passports or William Lee's guns, or I think the drugs were also there. There's also like a mood setting song or soundtrack behind it. And I think from that, you already get a sense of the tone of the film. And then it immediately goes into like, I think a typewritten story where he's talking about meeting with this young Jewish boy. And then it cuts into this scene where he's talking to this young Jewish boy about whether he is queer or not queer and whether it would upset his mother. So maybe we could talk about that scene, or we could just talk about the introduction of William Lee's character in general.
So I think thinking about the film as a film, but that's adapted from a novel, I think it's always kind of interesting to think about the translation here, because I have a copy of Junkie, which is written in first person, so I assume Queer is also written in first person. And with first person narratives of books, like you're able to usually essentially read the narrator's thoughts, right? And as far as I can remember, there's no voiceover in this film. So this entire film is presented as like Lee going through stuff. Obviously, we follow his range of narration, if not the whole movie, if I'm not wrong. We're always with William the whole movie. And for me, that's like such a critical difference between like how the book will read versus how the film is presented. And so for me, this film is making you try to understand Lee's perspective without actually putting you directly in his head or like with voiceover thoughts to articulate what he's trying to say. So the chapters and like the narrative structure of it kind of privileges time over thought, if that makes sense. It's like, here are some sections of his life rather than how he thinking about his life. So we're presented 3 different sections of his relationship with Eugene Allerton.
It's like it straddles the line between an adaptation of the novel Queer and, if not a biopic, then like a meditative commentary on William S. Burroughs' life. Like I don't say this knowing a lot about William S. Burroughs, but there seem to be allusions to other events in Burroughs' life, such as the murder of his wife.
Yep.
Which we talked about before we started rolling.
Yeah. I think Junkie and Queer are thought to be essentially autobiographical stories from William S. Burroughs. Like even the character itself is named William. So it is essentially a fictionalized account of his life filtered through some kind of creative lens. And then now it's filtered through Guadagnino understanding the story and then telling a story. And I guess the film is trying to figure out who and what Burroughs is himself. Like it almost kind of is a biopic, I guess. Like if we really think about it, it is a biopic.
Yeah. Or an autobiopic. I don't know.
It's not auto because Luca's doing it.
Autobot. In terms of how Lee is introduced, something that strikes me very quickly off the bat in this movie is how much the character of William Lee is performing for his conversational partners at almost every point, except maybe when he's talking with the Jason Schwartzman character. But even when he's on his own, like when he's just walking around the streets of Mexico City, kind of cruising, he is performing. He's performing his nationality, his sexuality, his personality. When I previously have said that I didn't feel I bought Craig as a performer in this movie, I think part of that is by design. Because William, the character, is so uncomfortable with himself and so constantly performing and not performing very effectively. Think of that cutesy little bow he does in the diner when he first sees Drew Starkey. There's an aspect of his character that is pathetic by design. And I think Daniel Craig dons that pathetic quality very vulnerably as a performer in a way that maybe I didn't give it credit for the first time around.
Like it's theatrical on purpose because the character is theatrical.
Yeah.
I mean, now that we're talking about Craig, I think Craig's performance is very good. Because like without the voiceover, I think we get a very strong sense of like what's going on in his head, like his sense of inferiority, the sense of like insecurity, like a very, very palpable sense of insecurity.
Oh yeah.
He carries himself very well. He's an older man, but he's like very fit and like big. You know what I mean? Like he takes up a lot of screen real estate.
Yeah.
And yet he feels so small in the way that he's being performed. Right? When he's talking to Drew, like he's like almost groveling at Eugene's feet, like constantly.
Yeah.
He's kind of always begging everyone. The only person that he doesn't beg is the bartender because he just orders shots all the time. But there's something, as you said, Eli, extremely pathetic about this man.
There is. And so much of it is in that physical performance because a lot can be relayed through dialogue. But I think what Luca does best is directing, blocking with actors and using that to express characters' interiority. And even more so than just movement, specifically looking at glances, like and eye line. So I'm thinking about this scene when after Allerton and Lee become friends, there's a scene with those two and Jason Schwartzman's character. Guidry's like saying something. Schwartzman's character is saying something. And Craig is just looking at Drew Starkey. He's just looking at his reaction. It's like very longing looking that's happening. And it's just these tiny things that I'm picking up on that you're like, oh, Lee is seeking this guy's approval. Like he's just hoping that this guy's like having a good time hanging out with him and his like gay friend. That's what he's trying to do this whole film. That is entwined with his search for the ayahuasca, which allows him to have this telepathic moment or like just peek into the mind to know, do you really love me or do you really like me? And that's like what this whole film comes to. That's what he's in search of the entire time. And we can talk about that ending and what that means for these characters a bit later.
Yeah, I have things to say.
Yeah. But I think there's this loneliness that we begin with Lee's character, that the possibility of being seen by someone and seeing someone for the first time, it lights a spark in him. I think very telling is that first meeting scene as Nirvana's Come As You Are plays. Lee is walking in slow-mo through these streets, happens upon a cockfight happening on the side of the road, and then a group of American expats walk by, and then he locks eyes with Allerton. And I think that's such a beautiful, powerful moment that is just relayed through glances and this song. And the play in facial expression between both of them I was like, this is classic Luca. That was the moment where I was like, oh my gosh, here we go. Let's get into this.
You know what choice I really like in that moment is that Luca is playing with eyeline in that shot reverse shot in an atypical way. Meaning, when we get the shot of Eugene Allerton, it's from William Lee's POV, direct optical, looking at him from across the cockfight. When we cut back to the reverse shot of Lee, it's from a low angle looking up at him. And typically that communicates a sense of power. But here, knowing that Lee is so desperate for approval, it's a feeling of like, aha, like here's the high that I'm looking for. This thing that fills my cup in a potentially meaningful way, but ultimately we know it's not going to be. The second thing that I like about that shot reverse shot is the frame obstruction. When he's looking across the men betting on the cockfight, their arms keep on obstructing Drew Starkey's face. There's a running through line in Queer about William Lee being unable to clearly see Eugene Allerton for many reasons, but primarily because he's so obsessed with getting this man's approval and some form of love. So their first moment is about William feeling the high of infatuation and fixation, and two, that it is obstructed visually feels pretty on the money.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of like classic Luca stuff. Like I really like the scene or the sequence of shots when he sees him on the street while he's inside the restaurant. He runs out to go talk to him. He's talking to some random other guy who doesn't show up too much. And the way that it plays out is that Eugene is walking by the restaurant, then looks right in, they see each other, and then you see from a wide shot Lee's perspective, seeing him, and then he's like, oh wait, this is the guy. And he like basically is about to run out. But then what they do is they cut to the shot of Eugene walking away after making eye contact, but that's in slow motion. That slows down the very quick cut that's happening in this situation. Because in a lot of the film, I think Luca tends to like using longer shots, but he will break up the rhythm by using these really, really quick cuts in like moments of like agency or urgency, really.
Yeah.
And like this is one of those moments. But in the slow motion, I really like because it also is like, whoa, like the world is like kind of slowing down, but also in a rush. And then after that, they just start talking outside on the street, and then it becomes realistic again. Like it's kind of like relaxed. And I really like Starkey's performance because I think he's unreadable. I do not know what's going around in his head. And I think what you're saying, Wilson, which is that the story really is just about Lee wondering if this guy likes him.
Yeah.
That is the whole story. Like
stretched out.
But I think if I go back to the opening question of like, what is the structure of the film? I think part of what makes it difficult for me for this film to really love it is that there's maybe too much other stuff. I think about that second act, right, which is traveling companions. And that's when, after Lee invites Eugene to go to South America with him, and then they just start like hanging out. And this is also when we start moving into exploring more of Lee's drug addiction, his heroin addiction, which doesn't show up that much in the first act at all. Just a few hints of it.
Well,
there is that really long take sequence that is actually, I think it's a very beautifully like performed sequence where what's the terminology? He does heroin?
It's a process shot. It's
at the end of the first act, yeah. So at the end of the first act, he starts shooting up, yes. So that's how we are introduced to the act 2, which is more about heroin, more about being a junkie. And it's just like, how does he use heroin? Like really just a step by step.
Yeah.
Like an instructional.
How to Use Heroin by Luca Guadagnino.
Makes it sound so nefarious. What's the WikiHow? It's just the clip from the movie.
Yeah.
You know, this is a digression, but this film is going to get screened in Singapore with cuts. And I feel like it's the drug use more than the homosexuality.
The gay sex is pretty like, it's pretty out there though. Even for Luca, it's like, you see a lot. There's a lot of cum.
As you are, as you are, as you are.
I set that up for you so well.
Thank you.
What were you saying, Wilson?
Okay, we can maybe move on to talk about the second act, but I feel like there's so many more. Because I think the way that the movie is structured, you have like maybe an hour in the first chapter before you move on to like the next 2 chapters, which are like maybe half an hour each. So you sort of understand why there's more narrative weight at the start of this because there's so much happening within these characters in this story. And then you sort of move location and the story, like, I guess, takes a turn in terms of the speed at which it's telling the story as well and the character beats. But we can talk about this traveling section of the film.
I think for part 2, and maybe part 3 as well, the obsession with Yagé or ayahuasca like starts to kind of overshadow a little bit that exploration of the relationship. I know that the finding of the Yagé is part of that, trying to read Allerton's mind. I get it. But I think I find the sudden like South American adventure part of this film a little uninteresting. There's also like the character of the botanist in chapter 3. And also him like talking to the random guy in that greenhouse, trying to find a Yagé. And I'm like, I mean, I get it thematically, but the most interesting parts of the movie are about the way that he interacts with Allerton more than this other part, or even the drug use, which the drug use is important, but like it's not really interesting to me to explore on its own. What is interesting is the relationship. And I think chapter 2, like I thought more would happen in that chapter, but then it's mostly about the drug use and how Eugene tries to like help him. Although there is a great scene when Eugene like pushes him at breakfast, which I really like.
Yeah.
They reach this arrangement where Eugene gets paid for and he hangs out with Lee and like they sleep together twice a week and Eugene's happy with their arrangement and Lee kind of tests the limits of the arrangement, I guess. And Eugene is interesting because he's both a guy that goes with the flow, but then also doesn't tell you what his boundaries are. Like he doesn't really explain himself very well. And so he's so hard to read. So like you can kind of feel Lee's frustration because you're like, this guy's giving you nothing. And yet you're sleeping with him and you're like, huh? What's happening with him? Relationship is so hard to explain or understand. It's just situationship, right? That is what it is.
But I think it is also just like that added layer of this being a queer relationship, right? You have this you face the world with when you're closeted or not queer. And then it's how you act when you are with a lover. Because that pushing happens the scene right after they have sex for the first time. And then he talks to Allerton afterwards, and I think he asks something like, but you enjoy it, don't you? And Allerton says, yeah, of course I do. And that, of course, makes Lee really happy. And he's sort of riding off of that high into the next morning where Allerton's just not feeling it anymore and pushes him away. But I think this whole traveling section showcases a different side to this relationship that could be something where Allerton has to take care of Lee because he is sick. And there's that scene where Lee's shivering in bed and asks Allerton if he can sleep next to him for his warmth. And Allerton says yes, he allows it after a long pause. And then he comes over, he lies down next to him, and Lee puts his arm around Allerton, which is a Lee-initiated physical act. But then the Allerton-initiated physical act of wrapping his legs around Lee is this incredible moment that is seared into Lee's brain until basically his death at the end of the film, where he's thinking about that he's not initiating this. Like, Allerton's initiating this moment of touch with Lee. And that is an indication of affection, and that's an indication of love. And he's just toying with his brain, right? Allerton's toying with Lee's brain in this section, and Lee's like getting further and further into this hole of, oh my gosh, can I be with this guy or can I not?
I think that's why Wilson, as you said, it's so important that the movie spends a long first act setting up the depths of desperation that William Lee feels to be loved and to have affection, and to a certain extent to own and control in a relationship. And two, to make you feel the high that comes from their initial sexual encounter, which is very sensually displayed. And it's true, you do see a lot, and the performers really go there bravely. It's a thrilling scene on many levels. And then to make you feel like it could be a real thing before you realize it's done. Like, worth mentioning that, as Ben notes, the arrangement for this travel that William will pay for Eugene the whole way, it's basically a service at that point. It's not a relationship. Like, in my eyes, it is done and dead before the second act begins.
It becomes transactional, and I guess like she kind of turns Eugene into a sex worker in that sense, right?
Yeah.
Right. It becomes labor.
And those moments when he perceives Eugene as taking initiative in showing affection become moments of fixation because they are fantasy fulfillment. And I think Gene probably knows that on some level. And it's also why he's hesitant to get too close to William Lee after a certain point. But William Lee hangs on to it because it's all he has to go on to fulfill that wish, which I think is also why that ayahuasca trip at the end is not a genuine moment of connection between the two.
Wow. I really read it differently.
Wait, before we go into that, before we go into that, I want to pick up on this thing that you said, Wilson, about affection. Because I think not only is the film about Lee's desperation, but it's also about how he doesn't know how to read affection or physical intimacy for like a more abstract sense of love. Because we talk about that physical act of wrapping his legs around him, but is it just something that he does? Or is that love? Like, is affection love? And then I think what you're saying, Eli, about the transactional nature of the relationship also casts everything that Eugene does in doubt. You're just like, is he just touching me, or is he in love with me? Is he just doing it because I paid him? Because you think about the other man that Lee sleeps with in the first act.
Oh, yeah. Omar Apollo's character. Yeah.
Yeah, and like that just kind of happens, and then the man just leaves. And in that sense, like, he feels that just the physical intimacy doesn't fulfill him. But then the only thing he knows how to find is physical intimacy. The only thing he can make happen is physical intimacy. He can't buy love. He can't flirt his way into love. And so like that is kind of fascinating to think about in the frame of what the story really is that this is a man that can probably have sex with anybody in Mexico, but that's not the point. Like that's not what he wants.
And he's performing so hard, so constantly that he can't let down his guard enough to truly love or be loved. Because love takes a trust and an openness and a willing to be vulnerable that William Lee, partially by circumstance of being a closeted man in the 1950s, can't allow himself to do.
Yeah. Interesting. I fully get what you both are like taking from this in relation to the physical intimacy aspect of it, and also Allerton's own desires or wants as a character, and also that specific ayahuasca experience being something that is not genuine. I feel like I saw that as actually a genuine moment of connection that does scare Allerton. And that's why he leaves in such a haste, because he is afraid of the possibility of this relationship within the larger context of being a gay man in the 1950s. There's an impossibility in that for Allerton in that moment. And I think a lot of that also stems from Luca saying that this is not a story of unrequited love. He says it's rather a love story about two people that are not in sync. Like they are not loving each other at the same time, even though they have this love for one another. It's never happening at the same time. And that is also why Natalie, who's previous guest on the podcast, she wrote a review of this film. Also really, really liked it. Thanks, Natalie. Love you. She says that she sees a lot of in the mood for love in this. And I agree a lot with this, because the circumstances of loving someone, but them not loving you, and then you also do share this love for each other, is very similar, that specific situation with these two couples. But I can also understand the reading of this as Lee paying Allerton for this, and this being a transactional relationship, and Allerton feeling like he has to act for Lee or like be there for Lee like that, and him feeling like, oh, this is a job. And also, I'm very much attuned to the version of the story where they do have feelings for each other, but there's an impossibility of this happening that's keeping them away from each other.
Yeah, I can totally get behind that reading, Wilson. I totally see what you mean. I'm even now thinking about how the movie ends with William Lee as an old man, presumably fading away on a hotel bed. And also the visual similarity, both in physique and appearance and costuming, between Drew Starkey and Daniel Craig in this movie. That out of syncness is not just an out of syncness with each other, but with themselves, or like as mirrors of each other. That Daniel Craig is an older man trying to reach for a younger man's love. And maybe part of that ayahuasca trip is Eugene Allerton recognizing the potential for himself to become William Lee in his future and feeling scared by that.
I'm thinking about the comparison within the mood for love, and I think the key difference that makes it harder to read it the way you want to read it, Wilson, although I think it is a perfectly fair reading of the film to see it as two people who are in love, but like just it won't work out. But I think the thing that works against it is that this one is so strongly from Lee's perspective, that the lack of understanding of where Eugene comes from makes it very difficult to figure out if this is a two-way street. Because we are constantly questioning where Eugene is or where his head is at. Like, you have no idea. And because Lee doesn't know, we don't know. And it makes it very difficult to read it as two people who want to be together, especially when like it ends with essentially only one side of the story, which is like Lee's side of the story. I mean, I guess In the Mood for Love also does that, but In the Mood for Love definitely throughout the film gives you the perspective from both sides, and that you can buy into the fact that these are two people that want to come together, and the subjectivity is split between both of the characters. But whereas this one doesn't have that. And I think you can still read it. It's just that it's harder to glean. You have to put something into the movie yourself for you to read it that way. You have to believe something, which is perfectly fair and up to you to do as a viewer. But I think just the construction of it being so subjective from Lee is just difficult to have that kind of story, for me anyway, as when I look at it. I'm more inclined to feel the way Lee feels, which is confused and like unsure.
Mm-hmm. Why don't we talk specifically about that ayahuasca scene? Because there is a lot going on visually and stylistically within that scene that I found to be very, I guess for the first time, I'm like, wow, Luca's really like pushing what he can do with the medium here, utilizing, I guess, CGI and dance or like movement in that way. That's very interesting. I haven't seen Suspiria, but yeah, this is...
It's been a while since I've seen it. I was thinking about it. I was like, is this Suspiria? But I don't remember.
It definitely has shades of Suspiria in it.
It's very off-putting for Eli.
I will say that the ayahuasca trip, there are some sequences where their like hands touch as their bodies are morphing, and it goes like slow motion, fast motion. And they're like flipping around each other. That made me laugh and reminded me of Tim and Eric.
Were people laughing with you in the theater?
I saw it with friends of the pod, Fran Hoffner and Veronica Fitzpatrick, and Veronica and I definitely laughed at the same time at that like slow motion to fast motion thing.
Actually, the part of it that I really like is actually the overlaying. What do you call it?
Like when the bodies actually like go into each other?
No, just having two shots where it looks like he's not there.
Like double exposure kind of look.
Yeah, double exposure.
Yeah.
Because it's not the only time they do that in the film. And I like it every other time in the film where...
Wait, talk about the other times where it happened.
Yeah, so there's the one where Lee is essentially trying to touch Eugene, but he doesn't actually do it in the real shot. But like, what's real, right?
Yeah.
So these are the points where you see into Lee's perspective, like what he wants to do, that he wants to touch Eugene. Like he wants to be intimate with him. He wants to get closer to him. So like, stylistic device. It's just cool. Like I just like it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And here it's like happening where he's looking at Eugene, but Eugene is not fully physical or concrete because he's being kind of essentially the image is like 50% opacity. That's what's happening.
Yeah. Not the image. He is 50% of opacity.
Yeah,
the background is still there.
Yeah. So I like that. And I think the more subtle stuff is more interesting to me. I think the part where the bodies are starting to morph and like become one two-backed beast is like, okay. It definitely fits the ayahuasca vibe, but it's also like not nice to look at.
Yeah.
It's kind of scary.
Yeah.
That's Suspiria, baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting the trajectory of this trip as well. You have three big things that happen, right? You first have them like throwing up their hearts, and that comes really quickly. And the throw up sort of becomes a balloon that's attached to their mouths that fall out. And that's like, I think like a body horror moment that I was like, whoa, what's happening? And then we settle down into that 50% opacity thing that you're saying then. But I think that's the crucial moment in this whole trip, because that is when Lee and Allerton are telepathically communicating. And Allerton tells Lee whether or not this is actually what's happening, but Lee is envisioning Allerton telling him, I'm not queer, Lee. I'm not queer. I'm disembodied, which links back to a previous dream sequence where William Lee himself is telling, I think, his wife in this dream sequence that he's not queer. He's also disembodied.
That's his wife?
I don't know who that is. There's a woman, right? She's talking to him in that dream sequence earlier on. And I think it's his wife. It might be his wife. And then Lee says back to Allerton in this moment of telepathy, I know, it's okay. And then after that, they launch into this tactile moment. I think that's like when they're telling the truth. They're like, costumes are off. There's no pretense. It is just a genuine physical moment between them. I've heard about people who have done ayahuasca and telling me about their specific experiences doing it that have informed how I view this moment between these two characters.
The only drug I need is a good book.
Stay in school, folks.
I see the trip as a moment of connection between them. I like that it could be that. And there's serious doubt cast on that because we're so in William Lee's perspective for the rest of the movie. It could be him imagining, and we don't know. He, and by extension we, are totally projecting onto Eugene what we want to see or what we're afraid of seeing and being told.
I will say, the one moment where we get sort of more outside of Lee's perspective is that morning after moment where we are with Eugene Allerton having this conversation with Dr. Cotter. And she's saying, you need to stay a couple more days. I've never seen a connection like that between you two. And we are very much focused on Eugene at that moment. And then for Guadagnino to specifically choose that moment to have within Eugene's like narrative range and just having that moment of interiority for him, I think is very telling. And then right after, we lose him for the rest of the film. But we have like a very intimate moment where we're in a close-up of Eugene talking to Dr. Cotter and then glancing over at William Lee.
Albeit in a movie that's full of artifice and framed with William S. Burroughs or William Lee's words that are recounting this entire story. I'm not saying that what you just said is wrong, Wilson. We are getting a moment of narrative range with Eugene, but there's still constructions in the movie that allow us to cast doubt onto whether or not we ever really get to know what Eugene thinks and feels.
Yeah.
Should we talk about the ending? Like,
yeah,
the 2001 of it all?
Yeah, let's go there.
Because I was like, wait a minute.
It's literally 2001 A Space Odyssey.
Yeah, it's actually 2001, but gay.
Is it?
But no, I'm kidding.
I saw your review, and then there's a moment where she throws the Yagé root up, and it goes in slow-mo, and then he catches it.
Oh,
and I was like, whoa.
Oh, I forgot about that.
2001 as well.
I mean, just to like set the scene, it's like at the end when he goes back in the epilogue to that hotel room and he takes a nap and he wakes up and then he sees a miniature of the hotel and then he looks into it and he sees himself and then he enters a red room and then he shoots Allerton, which is a reference to how William S. Burroughs shot his wife, doing basically the same game, trying to shoot a glass off his wife's head. And then after that starts like aging within the scene, like how 2001 ends where I forgot the man's name, but he starts aging and like sees himself aging.
Dave Bowman, played by Keir Dullea,
lies on the bed and slowly, seemingly passes away.
But on that bed, feels the legs, has that leg moment.
So I was like, whoa, I want more of this when that scene was happening. I was like, whoa. And I mean, there was a lot of like other really quite intense stuff happening. I mean, you got an ayahuasca trip. You got that dream sequence with the woman, which I forgot about, where she has no legs.
Yeah.
There's some wild stuff here. And I think
leg moment.
Yeah, so is that Suspiria-ness of like kind of like wild stuff. Like you compare it to Challenges is so tame in terms of like what it's trying to do. Like it's pretty wild, but it's pretty like wild within the tools that we're kind of used to or like okay with.
Yeah.
Here's like, nope, let me just like go full art film, which is like interesting.
Mm-hmm. That's why it's like so crazy to me that this is the exact same team. And they just like Luca's like, let me bring together everyone again to do this.
to shout out Martin Prom again, because I don't know how he does it. Like his favor to shadows, like Daniel Craig's wearing this hat a lot, and they never like bounce light up to like his face when he's like in darkness. They don't care. They're just like, whatever, it's dark because it's a hat. And I really like his preference to like let shadows be shadows. And I think there's a lot of texture to the image, and I still don't know how he does it in a way that other people don't seem to know how to do. And Mexico really feels like Mexico in terms of like the sun feels hot. And it's kind of amazing that it's a set. Like it doesn't feel like it's a set, really.
I actually disagree there.
But the light doesn't feel that setty, to me anyway.
I think that all the sets feel very set-y in a way that's on purpose. Like there's this one shot of, it's almost like B-roll of cars going down a freeway near Mexico City, and it looks terribly CGI'd.
That was CG for sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
And like the matte paintings in the background look like CGI to me. I think on purpose. I think that there's, whatever, maybe not on purpose, but it adds a layer.
Yeah, because Mexico's almost like a fantasy city right now, which kind of makes sense.
And it's performing in the same way that Lee is.
Yeah. But I do really like the texture of what I'm seeing. I just don't know how he's doing it with the light.
Even though I love this film, I know that there's just more room to take in this film compared to something like Challengers, where what you're served is closer to what you get. And I think this presents itself as being more open-ended. I mean, the other films that we've talked about, or the other film that we've talked about, and also maybe Call Me By Your Name, you sort of start getting a range of ways that you can come out of a Luca film, which I think is brilliant, because even with other directors that have very expansive filmographies, I think the way that they end their films sometimes like they are quite similar. Like you get quite of like definitive endings from directors that like to do definitive endings, and more open-ended ones from directors that like tend to leave you with that because that's what the tone of their films always are. But what I love about Luca is how malleable he can be from a narrative standpoint. But I think this still really very much fits within Luca's own thematic concerns of making films about desire and love and affection that you can sort of track within the filmography.
I mean, in comparison with like a Challengers, it's definitely less precise as a vehicle, but maybe that's just a matter of it being an adaptation of this novel, which, like reading that first chapter of Junkie, which is essentially just like a confessional. It feels like a confessional. It doesn't feel like it's going to be a tight story here. The same way that this isn't a tight story. And not all stories need to be tight and have economy or like be as laser focused as Challengers is.
Yeah.
So Luca can do both.
Yeah. And props to Koritsky's for also doing both.
That's true.
Yeah, we talked about how tightly constructed Challengers is.
It is very difficult to write something loose. Like it's kind of impossible.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that's impressive about its looseness is that Guadagnino has had a relationship with that novel since he was very young and has wanted to adapt it for decades. So being able to approach it with a kind of playfulness and spontaneity is all the more impressive. That he shrugged off the stakes of wanting to make this movie for so long. I don't know how the Nirvana needle drops, which don't even come back after a certain point, factor into it. And yet they feel somehow kind of a piece with the movie.
Mm-hmm.
It makes sense to me. I do like the needle drops.
Yeah.
I think about Guadagnino's obsession, I guess, with love and desire, and thinking about how Queer as a story is about that, but also about a lot of other stuff.
Yeah.
But he chose to keep all the other stuff in as well. And I do think about like, oh, what is it about the book that got its hooks in him? Like, is it just the desire stuff? Or is it maybe the aimlessness of Lee, or like being lost and like not knowing what to do with himself? Which is also, I think, in the movie. The movie is not just about the relationship. It's also about his own kind of disembodiedness that's not just about relationships, it's just about him
Yeah.
being kind of lost. Yeah. And I wonder if we can see stuff like that in other Luca films, which I think I can feel, like Tilda Swinton in I Am Love,
Yeah.
lost in her gilded cage. So I think maybe it's not just about love for Guadagnino.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's about being different, like queer in this other way. Like you feel like you are queer, like you are not like normal like other people.
Well, I think there's a reason that those two words are the same word. It is like to exist as a queer person is to be queer in the world. Great. Okay. I feel like we're getting to an end, but before we go to the end, I want to start doing this thing where we quickly do power rankings. So
What does that mean? S tier.
I want everyone to pull up on Letterboxd their Luca Guadagninos, go to show watched films, and then sort by your rating. And we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, whatever.
Oh, like literally a ranking.
So I've seen 7 projects, not including the short film that he did for a movie. I'm not going to count that. But I will count We Are Who We Are. I'm going to go number 7 for me, Bones of All. Number 6, A Bigger Splash. Number 5, We Are Who We Are. Number 4, I Am Love. Number 3, Queer. Number 2, Challengers. And number 1, I'm sorry to this man, Armie Hammer. It is still Call Me By Your Name.
Oh.
Okay, who wants to go next?
I can go. I have like 3 that are at the bottom, which I think are about the same. I don't think about them too much. But I think I need to rewatch A Bigger Splash, which has been a while. Maybe I'll like it better.
I love A Bigger Splash.
And that's We Are Who We Are, Suspiria. These are all kind of like here at the bottom. Bones and All, which I think maybe is also of the same cloth with these, but somehow I gave it a higher rating. Then Queer, then Call Me By Your Name, then Challengers, and the top is I Am Love.
Nice.
From lowest to highest, it would be Suspiria, Queer, Call Me By Your Name, A Bigger Splash, and then I Am Love and Challengers. It would depend on my mood, which one would be number 1. Right now, probably I Am Love.
Nice.
Which is the right choice.
Yes. Well, maybe not. I don't know. But I Am Love is a 5-star for all 3 of us, so it doesn't really matter.
Yep.
But last tidbit, I don't know if he's being genuine in this moment, but when Luca was presenting this film at New York Film Festival, he was like, I asked Jason Schwartzman to be the chef in I Am Love like 5 times, and he kept on saying, no, I'm too short for Tilda Swinton.
That would be so crazy.
I don't know if he's being legit or not, but I found that really funny and wanted to share it on the episode.
That is really funny.
That would have changed the movie a lot for me. I think.
Lot.
I think that would have been a bad choice.
I agree.
Yeah. I'm glad that he found like an Italian guy, like a legit Italian man to do that.
Yeah. No, I like that I don't know who that guy is. Like, who's this guy?
Yes.
If it was Schwartzman, I'd be like, oh my God, it's Rushmore.
It's Rushmore.
Oh,
he's wearing a Rushmore shirt.
What? That wasn't planned at all.
Not at all. I will say Schwartzman is fantastic in this film. He's
I love
so
him in this,
funny. And like, I don't know, this little belly he has and how he's able to get so many guys as well. It's like so, I'm like, wow.
Like how he's always lounging somehow. Like
putting his feet up somewhere. Yeah. Anywhere.
Yeah.
His character feels very nicely realized, even though we don't see him that much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chill guy.
Chill guy.
He's a chill guy.
Just like us.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Deep Cut. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave us a rating because that helps others discover the show. A really good way to support us is to leave us a review on our show on Apple Podcasts. And you can also comment on our episodes directly on Spotify if you have thoughts about this film. You can subscribe to us wherever you listen to podcasts so you'll know when our next episode drops. You can keep up with Deep Cut on Instagram and Letterboxd at Deep Cut Pod and on TikTok at Deep Cut Pod _film. Please also, if you want to chat with us, the best way to do this is come onto our Discord server. We are easily reachable and we have a really nice community there where we talk about movies, TV, music, anything. You can promote stuff you've written. Just come join us. It's a really nice community. We'll be there to welcome you. We also have a Patreon. If you want to support us, we deeply appreciate it. Please, you can come to our link in the description, or you can go to deepcutpod.com to find our Patreon, Discord, and all the other socials that we've mentioned here. A special shout out to Patreon Deep Cut Pick supporter, Leah Lai. Without you, the show really cannot happen. Deep Cut is hosted and produced by us, Wilson Lai, Benjamin Yap, and Eli Sands. Our cover art is designed by Justina Yam, and our theme song is composed by the one and only Eli Sands. I'm Wilson.
I'm Ben.
I'm Eli.
Take care, and we're looking forward to talking about more movies with you next time. Come!
I'm not bailing you out of this one.
No, I just want to end on the come.
Come.